Your coffee is still steaming. That's the last ordinary thing that happens to you all morning. You're sitting at the kitchen table of your apartment in Zurich, and not the version that shows up in glossy brochures, not the one your assistant lists whenever a journalist requests an interview that will never actually take place. The real one. Third floor, quiet street, no nameplate on the buzzer. You've lived here 11 years, and not a single neighbor has any idea what you actually do for a living. That's exactly how you want it. You lift your coffee and your phone buzzes once. Then again, then it won't stop. The message comes from a number that only 6 people on the planet possess. 3 words appear on the screen. Morocco is out. You set the coffee down. Not because of Morocco itself. Morocco will be fine. Morocco will land a hosting slot in 2034, whether they realize it yet or not. You set the coffee down because that single message means the entire bidding framework for the 2030 tournament, 18 months of negotiations, 4 governments, 2 sovereign wealth funds, and a financial structure so layered that even the lawyers involved can't see it whole, has just shifted underneath everyone. And it shifted in the last 12 hours while you were asleep, which means it's now your job to fix it before the rest of the world wakes up and starts asking questions nobody is supposed to be capable of answering. You are not the president of the federation. That distinction matters. The president stands at podiums. The president shakes hands for the cameras. The president arrives with motorcades and delivers speeches about the beauty of the sport. You've personally met 4 of them. You remember their names the way you remember hotel room numbers, useful for a little while, then forgotten entirely. Your own name has never once appeared in a press release. You've never stood in front of a camera in any official capacity. You occupy a completely different layer of the organization, the layer where the actual decisions get made. Your official title, buried somewhere in a Swiss corporate registry that nobody bothers to read, is Director of Strategic Infrastructure and Tournament Development. It sounds like a planning job. It sounds like someone who reviews stadium blueprints and turf quality reports. That's precisely the impression it's designed to give. You open your laptop. 17 unread emails sit in your inbox, but only 3 of them actually matter. One arrives from the Ministry of Finance in a Gulf nation. One comes from a law firm in Luxembourg you've retained for 9 years. One is from a man named Eric, someone you've never met face-to-face, who oversees the movement of a fund technically domiciled in the Cayman Islands, but whose real instructions come quietly, always from you. You open Eric's message first. The figure he lays out is $340 million. That's the shortfall, the gap between what the host nation publicly declared in its bid and the real operational cost once you factor in the contractors already locked into contracts, the logistics agreement signed before the bid was even formally filed, and the broadcast infrastructure deals that live in an entirely separate stack of paperwork, in separate offices, in a city that isn't Zurich and isn't the host country and doesn't appear anywhere in an official filing. $340 million. You've closed bigger gaps than this before. You once covered $600 million in 11 days, though that was under a different political climate, with a different set of banking relationships, and the man who helped you pull it off retired not long after and now lives quietly in rural Portugal, tending a garden and never picking up the phone. You call Eric. He answers on the first ring. He always answers on the first ring. You ask him a single question. Is the Luxembourg structure still clean? He says, yes. You tell him to hold the position for 72 hours and not to move a single dollar until you call him again. He says, understood. You hang up. The entire exchange lasts 41 seconds. By 8 in the morning, you're in a car that isn't yours. It belongs to a transportation company owned, through 2 layers of holding structures, by a logistics group that's one of a dozen organizations that have quietly depended on your goodwill for the better part of a decade. The driver never speaks to you. That's a standing arrangement. You're heading toward an office building near the lake. 7th floor, no logo anywhere on the door. Inside, 3 people are already waiting. You know all of them only by first name, which is exactly how they prefer it and exactly how you insist on it. There's a woman who used to serve as senior counsel at a major European bank. There's a man who spent 12 years inside a broadcasting consortium before you personally recruited him out. And there's a younger analyst, about 29, sharp as anything, still learning that sharpness in a room like this one only matters when it's aimed in exactly the right direction. You sit down. No small talk. You tell them the situation in Morocco has changed the entire calculus surrounding the Western Europe co-hosting package. You tell them the $340 million exposure has to be restructured before Thursday, when the host committee chairs fly into Geneva for what they believe will be a routine progress review. They don't know it isn't routine. You're the reason they don't know. You built the agenda. You arranged the room. You decided who sits where, who presents first, what information sits inside the binders on the table, and, more importantly, what information never makes it in at all. The former banking counsel slides a document across the table. You read it in 4 minutes. You correct 2 figures and initial the page. She nods. That document, no title on its cover, no signature line anywhere, will pass through 3 separate jurisdictions over the next 48 hours and emerge as a binding operational agreement determining exactly how $1.2 billion in tournament revenue gets classified, reported, and distributed. Most of that revenue is entirely legitimate. Most of it. You've been doing this for 19 years. You didn't begin here. Nobody begins here. You started as a junior logistics coordinator in the early 2000s, managing accommodation contracts for a regional qualifying tournament in South America. You were good at it, not because you were particularly organized, though you were, but because you understood almost immediately that the tournament itself was nearly beside the point. The matches were the surface. What mattered was the infrastructure underneath. The contracts, the rights packages, the vendor relationships, the government deals, the broadcast licensing agreements signed in hotel conference rooms at 11 at night, the evening before the announcement ceremony. That was where leverage actually lived. That was where value got created and quietly captured by whoever understood how to read the room. You learned to read the room. You spent 4 years watching how the senior figures operated, who called whom, who owed whom, who needed a problem solved quietly, and who was capable of solving it. You made yourself useful in ways that never appeared on any organizational chart. You resolved a customs dispute for a senior official during a tournament in Asia. You located a replacement contractor after one vanished 3 weeks before a major venue opening. You were the person who showed up when something broke and quietly made it right without ever making noise about it. By 2009, the right people knew your name. By 2012, you were sitting in rooms you had no official clearance to be in. By 2015, you were running them. The money arrived gradually, and then it arrived all at once, never in a way that would trigger scrutiny. You are not reckless. Reckless people in this world end up in one of 2 places: in front of investigators, or in a version of retirement that doesn't resemble retirement at all. You've watched both outcomes play out firsthand. On 2 separate occasions, you were the one who arranged for the second outcome to happen. Not violently, not with any drama, but through a quiet withdrawal of access, a gentle rerouting of relationships, a handful of phone calls that left someone suddenly standing outside a structure they used to belong to, with no real understanding of how they'd ended up there. Your wealth doesn't look like wealth. You don't own a yacht. You own a stake in a company that charters yachts, which is an entirely different thing. You don't own a private jet. You have an arrangement with a flight management company that grants you access whenever you need it. Your apartment in Zurich is comfortable, nothing more. You hold a second property in the south of France registered under a trust set up by a law firm in Liechtenstein. Your holdings are spread across 6 structures in 4 jurisdictions, and the combined value of it all is a number that would be impressive, even in a room full of people for whom enormous figures are ordinary conversation. But that number has never existed in a single document. It never had. That's by design. It has always been by design. Thursday arrives. The host committee chairs land in Geneva. You take a seat at the end of the table, never the head, never once the head. You're introduced as a senior advisor. You speak 3 times across 2 hours. Each time you speak, the room recalibrates. You can feel it happen. The air shifts just slightly. Even the people in the room who don't fully grasp what you do understand, in some instinctive way, that the room tilts towards you the moment you open your mouth and settles back to neutral the moment you stop. The meeting wraps. The gap gets covered, not elegantly. Elegance takes more time than this, but structurally, which is what actually matters right now. The Luxembourg Fund absorbs a portion of it. A reclassification of broadcast rights handles another slice. The remainder gets addressed through a vendor prepayment arrangement that will be logged as a standard operational advance and which will, in 18 months, look completely unremarkable during an audit, i.e., because you've already decided exactly what that audit will focus on. On the way out, one of the host committee chairs, a man in his 60s, former government official, deeply connected in his home country, thoroughly used to being the most important person in any room, stops you near the elevator. He mentions wanting to discuss the operational timeline further, perhaps over dinner. He isn't really asking about logistics. He's testing whether he can reach you directly, whether he has that kind of access to you. You tell him your assistant will follow up. You don't have an assistant. The elevator doors close. For a moment, you study your own reflection in the polished metal. Suit, no tie, mostly the same face you had before any of this began. A little older, a little stiller behind the eyes. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from calm, but from having fully internalized consequence. When you've spent enough time inside the engine room of something this large and this powerful, you stop flinching at the noise. You become the noise, or more precisely, you become the one who decides when the noise happens, what it sounds like, who hears it, and who never does. The tournament kicks off in 14 months. 64 matches, 48 stadiums, 16 cities, a global television audience of 5 billion people. They'll watch a ball move across a field of grass. They'll feel something, joy, heartbreak. That particular electric charge that comes from witnessing something human and beautiful and over, almost as soon as it happens. They will have no idea what holds that entire experience together. They will have no idea that the whole structure, the rights, the money, the contracts, the political arrangements, the financial architecture making it all possible in exactly the shape it takes, runs through a layer of decisions made in quiet rooms by people whose names they will never see. You step out into the Geneva afternoon. Your phone buzzes. It's Eric. Is the Luxembourg structure still clean? You slide the phone into your pocket and walk toward the lake. There's a tournament to run, not publicly, not loudly, but in the only way it has ever truly been run, from the inside in silence. The world will watch billions of people celebrate the most watched sporting event in human history. But here's the real question, worth sitting with. If the person who actually controls all of it has no face, no title, and no public record anywhere, does the power belong to the tournament, or does the tournament belong to the power?